Great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to open, at least as we always do, with public comments. And looks like we have, I don't know if we have a sign up, but we have folks who are here, and it looks like we have an attendee, Yashar, who has a public comment. Let me open it up there.
Okay.
Yashar, the stage is yours.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Excellent.
Great. Hi, I'm Yashar Vasa. I use he, him pronouns. I'm Executive Director at Friends of Trees. Greetings, Dr. Shondis and Urban Forestry Commissioners. So it's official. We need trees more than ever, right? Friends of Trees submits this testimony to share information, explore issues, and raise awareness about the future of community tree planting and tree care in Portland. Your mission and ours are closely aligned, and we'd like to consider you partners in our work. As such, we seek your advice and advocacy at this critical juncture. At a time of catastrophic climate events locally and around the world, we know that planting trees is a key part of a comprehensive climate strategy. Friends of Trees would argue that planting and caring for trees with community members is also key to fighting climate change. We know anecdotally that volunteering to plant and care for trees increases community members' overall engagement with, concern about, and continued action regarding the environment, climate change, and overall civic life. There's a ripple effect from tree planting that also fights climate change beyond the actual trees. We've been successfully engaged in this work for 32 years, and a key part of our programming that directly impacts the city of Portland in a wide variety of ways has funding that is only partial and finite. As most of you know, Friends of Trees is nearing the end of our contract with Bureau of Environmental Services. This partnership supported the engagement of local volunteers to plant and care for neighborhood trees. Since 2008, we've developed rapport and systems with BES under 2 contracts, resulting in more than 2,000 street and yard trees planted every season for a total of 40,000 trees planted in Portland neighborhoods through this partnership. These trees have a typical first-year survival rate of 97%. Over 65% of the trees planted through our BES partnership are planted in historically underserved, low canopy, low income, racially diverse neighborhoods, bringing the countless benefits of trees to the neighborhoods that need them most. 2,000 trees annually for a total of 10,000 street trees are pruned for structural health and clearance. And every season, 3,000 plus community members come out to our plant and care for trees events. That's a total of 30,000 volunteers donating over a quarter million hours through this partnership. Community partnerships, including BIPOC organizations that reach and serve historically underserved, marginalized communities such as PUIC, Blueprint Foundation, Wisdom of the Elders, Apano, and David Douglas High School. Our partnerships provide youth with environmental education and hands-on tree planting experiences, high school internships that focus on leadership, skill building, and job training, adult workforce training, and more. This programming has been replicated by nonprofit organizations and municipalities around the country. The unparalleled programming not only provides indisputable results, it is absolutely beloved by the community. We have heard from Commissioner Mapp's office that there will be gap funding through BES to continue this programming at a decreased level this next year. So we are here to ask for your support in the following ways. As a primary implementer of community tree planting and care, FOT is interested in working more directly with Urban Forestry and the Urban Forestry Commission and being involved in tree planting strategies and programming so we can complement one another's work, offer the community multiple planting options, and avoid duplication as we have done with BES. We would appreciate your guidance and feedback on how best to move this forward, as we have been seen as a city contractor and often that has prevented this opportunity for collaboration. This could be particularly important as the Levy funding is utilized, as at this time we have heard that the plan will not include community planting. With BES being the only city funder of this type of programming, FOT and our partners are concerned about the precarious place that could put this type of valuable community programming. Specifically, we'd like to know how we can stay connected with the UFC and keep you all up to date on our work in the city if that is of interest to you. We always find it helpful to understand the values and goals of the stakeholders within the community, and have a regular way to stay connected would be helpful for us. Thank you for your time and attention today. We are grateful for your service as commission members and appreciate any guidance or further conversation you'd like to have.
Thank you, Yashar. Commissioners, any response?
I'd like to respond.
Sure.
think,
Damon?
so I'm from time to time, a Friends of Trees volunteer and a sponsor, and also on BES's tree planting contract, and Urban Forestry's tree planting contract. That being said, Friends of Trees has been doing an amazing job for many, many years. Not only getting trees in the ground, keeping them alive, and keeping the community engaged. And I think that not having Friends of Trees as part of the tree team in Portland is going to be a huge loss. And is, from my understanding, Friends of Trees used to have a seat at the table when we were gathering around the table at UFC. At least BES did, and it'd be great to find out, at least have regular reporting on what their activities are in Portland and in the region. I think they're a great organization that needs to have a good, clear communication with us.
Thank you, Damon. Any other commissioner responses?
Vivek, this is Bruce. I'm a longtime volunteer with Friends of Trees and am greatly dismayed at the current situation where the city will not be supporting community-based tree planting and pruning. In the short term, I think this will be a tremendous egg in the face for certain city bureaus. I think there's going to be a loss of public support for those city bureaus. Long term, I'm not sure what this might mean, but in the short term, it's a very bad situation, and it reflects poorly on many different people within public agencies. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Vivek, I just had a quick question, maybe to pass along to Yashar. Is one thing that was mentioned is just opportunities to collaborate and to hear more. And I'm curious if, Yashar or folks at Friends of Trees would be willing, if we're able to get it on our agenda in the future, to come and kind of present to us on the work, kind of like we're going to hear about Urban Forestry's tree planting strategy today, if that would be something of interest to the folks at Friends of Trees, so we can hear more about their work.
Yeah, as an agenda item, Megan?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We can we can check in with Brian and Jen about getting that up. Are you thinking maybe next time or the time after? Any specific timing that you're?
I mean, that would be great, but I don't know the competing agenda items, but I think it would be really wonderful. And I think we all know that there's a lot of larger issues that are happening. So I think this would be a really important time for us to get an opportunity to hear more about like the impact of the work that has been done. So we all kind of have a full picture of what it would mean for there to be a loss to that work, and honestly to the community partnerships as well, which I appreciated that because it's really pivotal.
Okay, thanks, Megan. I see Adrian and Greg, and then Greg.
Yes, so I'm new to the commission, so I don't know the history of the politics behind this, but even looking at the basic numbers in the tree report and knowing the success of Friends of Trees, this is going to be an absolutely huge loss. I think this community arm sort of dwarfs almost anything that the city can do on its own. But more importantly, the city agencies are looking for ways to really effectively work with the communities. And here's something that absolutely has a proven track record. We're struggling to, in a sense, make things up. So I think this is a really critical function that needs to have true infrastructure support going forward.
Thank you, Adrian. Greg. Greg, we can't hear you.
I'm
Oh.
just clicking and clicking. Yeah, this is tough because I've got the Urban Forestry Commission hat as well as Friends of Trees. I've planted with them since they started, and I'm a crew leader for both planting and pruning. So, you know, I've seen and led, you know, those teams and seen community rooms full of people, and I just don't know that the Parks Bureau or BES can kind of rally that many people for the support of trees, let alone the actual hands-on work. I mean, there's stuff you can do with money in paying professionals, but I think the community aspect of it is very important. And I just want to say that, you know, we'll hear from Jen and everybody else. But when we see the presentation on the tree planting, please take careful look on the map of trees planted. There's a color for Friends of Trees. And if you look at the numbers in the report, you know, BES was planting about 3 times the number of trees as Parks Urban Forestry, setting aside what everybody was doing in natural areas. So I just think it's a key component. And I guess I find it a little offensive to think that they'd be having to bid against people that are organizations that have been partners. I mean, I may have just been reading things into it, but at any rate, that's my 5 cents.
Okay, thank you, Greg. I saw Jen's hand next. Jen, can I call on you and then we'll close out with Daniel?
Sounds good. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. So since folks are saying this, I've been a volunteer with Friends of Trees since 2009, still am, and so are many urban forestry staff. I'm going to speak to the contracting component of this. And there was articles I sent out this morning and links. One of them was the Willamette Week article that came out a couple days ago about this topic, as well as a letter that Yashar, hello Yashar, has sent out. So just have those in mind. And there was another link there too about Vivek stuff. But the Friends of Trees contract with BES is expiring. That is a standard step in city contracting processes. And other standard steps in city contract processes are doing what's called a request for proposals, which is basically publicizing the opportunity for parties to apply basically to become contractors. And that article and BES have said that they are planning to do that. The contracting process, and this is specific to what Greg just said and some other folks mentioned less directly, it's designed intentionally by the city to promote fairness and opportunities for others to have a chance to apply and perhaps be selected as contractors. And increasingly, the city's contracting process, which is required for all bureaus to follow, promotes partnerships and contracting directly with BIPOC or owned or staffed or both companies and organizations and other historically marginalized organizations. And that is one of the many, I guess you'd say, efforts the city is doing to dismantle racism and empower and connect and provide funding and support for marginalized, historically marginalized folks in Portland. And that was in the article, in the Willamette Week article, that BES has that intention. That was also a key recommendation of the last city tree planting stakeholder process, which is the one, if this helps you remember, that Vivek chaired. That idea of having more direct work and support and ownership by BIPOC organizations to help change the patterns that government has had in the past, the negative patterns. So both BES and Parks plan to pursue that approach in future contracting, and in fact, we're expected to do that. Meantime, Friends of Trees continues to be a tree planting contractor with Parks. And that and our other planting contracts in parks, including with Treecology, Damon's company, expire further in the future than BES's. And I also wanted to point out that the Willamette Week article, it got something a little bit incorrect. It said that parks planting is moving to streets, and it's not, we're not stopping any planting activities or areas. We're actually increasing all of them, including on private property, streets, parks, and other city properties. And you'll hear more about that shortly.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Daniel, you want to close this out before we can move to Forester's, I think, actually minutes and then Forester's report?
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. So just in terms of disclosure and conflict of interest, that type of thing, my organization, Johnson Creek Watershed Council, has partnered on projects with Friends of Trees for, gosh, at least 20 years. And we receive funding for tree planting from BES on private property, but not on any public property. So I did want to mention a couple things. One thing, I think that this whole aspect of community forestry, community tree planting, regardless of what organization gets the contract, because I totally understand about public contracting laws. I have been dealing with that for many years. I think it's important that we continue to have a community tree planting approach in this city. I think contractors can get plantings done a lot more efficiently for a lot less money than city employees could. And especially working with contractors that have deep roots with the community really helps build community support, which is going to be important for the city's ability to get funding long-term from taxpayers. So I think this is really, really important. The other thing I wanted to mention is, you know, it sounds like there's been a little bit of progress with the two bureaus, but we still have some issues that remain unresolved. And I would like to mention again, I think that this commission at this meeting, we might be able to help break through the logjam a little bit if the two bureaus would actually come to our meeting in the near future and present where they are, because my feeling is that the two bureaus do not really understand what the other bureaus are saying or what their current most recent positions are. I've come to this conclusion by talking to folks from both sides and feeling like they're not on the same page in terms of what they think the situation is. So I would like to hopefully say, come to an Urban Forestry Commission meeting, and that might be a helpful way to break through the logjam. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. I want to make sure we're well behind schedule, in no part due to our own lingering too long. This was started late, so I want to just have you all take a look at the minutes and see if we can start on that process. Jen, did you have a quick response or interjection? I want to keep this moving.
Yeah, me too. And I was going to suggest that we hate to do this, but we have in the past, we could defer the minutes to the next time.
Yeah, that might actually be okay. Is anyone opposed to moving? Thanks for that suggestion, Jen. Anyone opposed to moving the May minutes to August? And so it gives us a little extra time to catch up.
That sounds great.
Okay. I hear no opposition, so I think we'll just move forward to the Forester's report and have you continue, Jen.
Sounds great. Thank you. First thing, obviously Brian is away, and boy, do we miss him. We also had arranged for other staff to cover the meeting today, specifically run the Zoom. And last minute, there was a family emergency. So I apologize for the mess up this morning. It was really the result of things changing pretty rapidly. And thank you to Angie for doing kind of double duty, presenting and also running the Zoom today. And Casey Jogerst is here to help with the Zoom also. And I also want to recognize that, not here to present anything, but just because he hasn't been before, Tim Collier, the Parks Communications and Community Engagement Manager, is here as well. I have 7 items for you today. Please hold your questions to the end. I'm going to try to be real concise and get through them quickly so there is still time because we're behind. First thing, the most important thing that's going on right now really is heat and trees, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you that. We've had extreme, unprecedented heat that's created a scale and type of tree impacts that we've never seen before. I feel like I need more vocabulary. I keep having to say unprecedented. Continuing to see lots of sun scorch, scalding on species in extents and in locations that are not usually affected by normal summer heat. South and west sides of trees and trees near hardscapes, particularly roads and pavement, especially large expanses of pavement. For example, along I-5 is a great example where you just see tons of brown needles and curled dry leaves. So climate scientists have linked the heat dome event to human-caused global warming and climate crisis, and we expect to see more of it from those same scientists, which is an awful prospect. So a lot of our time in the days since then have been reiterating the climate crisis response policies and practices that we've already had in place, and trying to increase public awareness around those things. And now there's, of course, greater urgency. And this segues into my next item. You know, it's almost impossible to say that there's a bright side to that heat dome event, but it did pique broad and new interest in the climate crisis, the patterns of inequity created by racist policy and culture, heat-related deaths, human and otherwise, and the important role that urban trees and the forests in general have in responding. So in that regard, you all received a couple times this week links to a lot of the recent national media coverage, local coverage. Just this morning, I also sent along Willamette Week's interview with Vivek, which was published yesterday, which I thought was terrific. These are all fantastic to see. I'm sure you all agree with that. They're much needed. They were seeing increased urgency and interest, and there have been a lot more inquiries and involvement requests from nonprofits, from other cities, other bureaus, for example, in designing capital improvement projects, for example. And there have also been a couple of media interviews, including with Commissioner Rubio and her staff, tours of some recent East Portland free street tree and park plantings with parks leadership and the commissioner and her staff and reporters. And also coincidentally, Parks and Urban Forestry right now are working on the fall budget request, which thanks to the operations levy could be a real game changer for trees in the city. So I want to point out, Commission, that this is an opportune time like none before for you to communicate with city decision makers about where trees and the urban forest and urban forestry fit into this, the urgency, equity issues, and your subsequent advice to them. And ways you might do that would be through letters to council and/or commissioners, testimony at council, and with commissioners. I'm going to move to my fourth item, and then I'll have four more after that. I said this a little bit before, but I want to make sure I capture everything in it. With Friends of Trees, with Yashar being here today, this kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but remember that a lot of this is about the contracting needs, and that we have to follow those, BES and Parks and everyone else. And we're increasingly looking at how to do those contracts and other opportunities to support folks who haven't had opportunities before, specifically historically marginalized communities. And you're going to see that same thing from urban forestry in the future, as you're seeing from BES, that we're going to be continuing to work on how to design those contracts and how to engage with those community partners, including new ones that we haven't had before, looking to foster those relationships through the tool of being able to pay for the services through contracts and other ways to really change that landscape. And then I'll move on to the fifth one. We've shared the commissioners, all of your information requests with Bureau of Environmental Services. If you recall, we did that at the last meeting or the one before. I think it was the last meeting. And as you know, BS has been reorganizing. They have staff who are new to the city and to tree planting. and they clearly have contracting changes going on as well as program changes going on. There's a lot of learning, change, communication and collaboration that naturally has to take place with that. Parks is the city entity responsible for trees, and we've asked BES to have coordinated plans and communications about city planting plans as one entity to avoid confusion and conflict that we've seen in the past, and to make planting as effective and as efficient as possible going forward. And the two bureaus program managers are meeting regularly to that end, and to establish a relationship that's really productive and fruitful and moves past and into ramping up as we're planning to do. So there'll be more of that information to come. And I'll ask you to be patient on that, because this all does take time. And right now there's a lot of confusion, and Daniel, you brought this up, confusion about what plans are, how those conflict or overlap, how they can be integrated, how they should be organized. And as I've mentioned before, that's not something that commissioners or bureaus sitting with the Urban Forestry Commission are going to resolve. That's something that bureaus just have to work through. That is the role of the bureaus to do that, whether it's on this topic or other ones. Other things I have committed to updating on, these should be relatively quick. There's nothing new to report really regarding the increased water bureau setback for tree planting from water transmission lines to 10 feet, or for the Streets 2035 project. I want to note here, though, when we see this heightened awareness around the deadly heat effects and how trees would mitigate those or help mitigate those, these are the types of policy issues where I would hope to see some more open eyes and some perhaps different discussions happening. So elevating trees because of what we've seen recently. There are Streets 2035 project team meetings scheduled for September. And that's the next step. So nothing will be happening next month. And as a reminder, that project includes the 10-foot setback issue. Regarding street tree policy, in other words, that the adjacent property owner must maintain the street trees. Due to the extreme heat, we've had the opportunity to share some information on burdens and barriers of current city policy with Commissioner Rubio and her staff. And that's a great start. Next item I want to move to, again, is Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. This is almost the last one. So if you recall, in the last meeting, I let you know that Parks is looking for Urban Forestry Commission direct involvement in the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland project. And that is, as a reminder, kind of the revisioning and revising the mission statement for the Parks Bureau, and it's time so that hopefully we can apply the new improved vision informed by a lot of community stakeholders to use of the operations levy and the larger Sustainable Futures project. So a little bit of information on that. There are two groups, and we'll be looking at the next meeting, I believe, Vivek, if that's right, to select commissioners to represent in these two groups. The first group is Mission, Vision, Values, Equity Statement team, and they will largely use community listening to create and refine the mission, vision, values, and equity statements for parks. The other, the actions and results team. And that team will use community listening, again, to align Bureau outcomes, long-term results, performance targets and metrics, key services, strategic actions, and ultimately investments. So after this meeting, I will send that and more information to all commissioners so you can be thinking about this until the next meeting. And again, this is, I'm going to say unprecedented again. This is a really unprecedented opportunity for there to be more investment in the city's tree canopy and the city's urban forestry program. And we are working now on plans for that. And that is the segue to my final point for you today. Next month is the right timing in the city's budget process that we will be talking about budget. Claudio Campuzano, the Bureau's finance manager, will be joining us to that end. I'm not sure in how much detail we'll be able to go yet, but I'm hoping in a decent degree of detail. And in the fall bump, which happens in November, so Parks has to prepare and submit all those things very soon at the end of the summer, which is why August is prime time for this to come to the commission. We hope to see, I hope to see a significant allocation of that operations levy funding come to urban forestry and trees and all aspects of that, from Title 11 implementation to partnerships and community engagement to tree planting, et cetera. The meeting is also planned to include an introduction to the park's racial equity lens. And that we have not had before. And that's an important tool for commissioners to be familiar with, to apply as they advise on policies going forward. And of course, we'll hopefully select the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland representative. That's what I know for now. And as you know, agendas can swing and change, but those are the timely things. That concludes my formal report. If anyone has any questions, please ask.
All right, any hands up? Questions on a bunch of things? Okay, Barbara? Yeah.
So I know that we have a topic coming up about meeting time and location, and it just seems that we whiz through our meetings, and a lot of times we say, well, gee, we'd like an update on that, or we'd like to hear from so-and-so, and we don't have oftentimes enough time, or Jen did a masterful job of rushing through her items, but a lot of times it seems like we don't have adequate time to talk about things, or people have questions and we have to move on. So I'm not asking for an answer now, but potentially maybe, since we're all in at least sitting in front of some sort of device somewhere, maybe there's a possibility of having a slightly, not a lot, but a slightly longer meeting to get some of these topics in and covered, so that we can, sometimes it doesn't feel like we make as much progress as we could, just because we're so short on time. So it's not a question, it's just a comment. We can hold it until the 11 to 11:30 discussion, but just a thought.
Thanks, Barbara. I think I share your sentiment in terms of moving through stuff really fast. And it is unfortunate that we can't dig into it. It's always a balance between what are the things that are like pressing and urgent, and what we can kind of dig our teeth into. And so that's where the priorities discussion really comes into play. Like, as you're hearing these things, let's get those priorities marked down and figure out which ones we really want to, we have such a limited time. Which ones do we want to spend more time on and which ones less? But really appreciate that input. Adrian and then Greg.
Yes, I want to follow up, Jen, on your comment about using this heat dome event, to create a sense of urgency and what's going to come out of that. And that's very exciting that you're moving forward, it sounds like, with a bigger budget request and et cetera. It's interesting, I've been involved in a lot of safety and medicine work and so forth. And we always say that translating evidence into practice takes an average of 17 years. But when we would have a safety issue or a regulatory issue that would come up, it would be in a sense terrible, but also, we would almost clap, because here was this opportunity to light a fire and quickly make change and kind of speed up that translation. So I just want to make sure that we utilize this event before, people forget, to be very bold. To say we need a timeline for getting to 50% tree cover. And here's the budget we need, and here's the structure for funding that we need, and do something like that quickly. I know we're constrained because we have to come up with a new tree plan and et cetera, but is there a way to sort of have our cake and eat it too? So I just wanted to plant that seed.
Thanks, Adrian. Really liked your 50% tree cover mention. That's
Hey, yeah.
Sounds delightful. Greg.
I was hoping that Jen could go back. in her speed, I didn't really quite understand what she said was discussed or came up about sort of homeowners having responsibility for street trees.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry I had to do it fast. I felt really harried because we missed the first however many minutes, and I know Vivek wanted to rush this along. So it'll be in the minutes. I'll speak to it now, and please, yeah, let me know if I should reiterate something. It was pretty brief, Greg, as you all probably recall from previous meetings, just because of capacity and because what folks voted for in the operations levy and what they did not. They did not vote for public maintenance of street trees yet. We've had that kind of in a back parking lot, but because of this incredible heat event, it was kind of a pleasant surprise. We were able to get out into East Portland and walk around and look at some of the free street trees that we've been planting there. And this was in the Hazelwood and Mill Park neighborhood, as well as the park trees there. And those trees have been planted by contractors, including Tree Ecology, Damon's group, Cascadian, and Friends of Trees. That became part of the conversation, was simply it. It was talking about what are the burdens and barriers. And it was interesting to me that folks kind of jumped to this conclusion that, well, people don't know that trees are good. And we know, and someone you're going to meet later today, Alex Javier, also know from his experience in San Francisco, where he most recently came here from, that that's actually not what we found. And when we created Growing a More Equitable Forest, what we found was, yeah, people know about trees. They want trees. The barriers and the burdens are the cost. And when it's a city property that folks have to maintain, and they're trying to keep the roof on their heads and the food on the table, that's not where they want their money to go. And when Angie talks about the free street tree program, I think she's going to talk a little bit about what it takes for us to plant, 1,000 trees. It takes like twice as much asking folks because they tell us no, they don't want them. So that was it, Greg. It was just that start on an awareness with Commissioner Rubio, and there were a few of her staff there as well. And I'll say too, we spent a lot of time really looking at how trees are planted. What are the important types of trees to plant? That small form trees are not where we get most of our benefits, and that our programs focus on those, and that those have been challenges in other programs to get large form, evergreen, native, climate resistant trees, including with Friends of Trees. And that's something we've communicated, that those are challenges that need to get addressed. And also how things are planted, that they're planted correctly, that the stock is good quality stock. And there have been challenges with that as well, that have been communicated also. And so when we talk about numbers, you see, the Million Tree Campaign, or you see this group planted 2,000 of these. Your next question should always be, tell me more. What trees did you plant? Where did they go? Did they go to low canopy, low income neighborhoods where they're most needed, where we should prioritize the limited resources we have? Were they planted well? Do they have girdling roots? Those sorts of things, because those aren't going to make it, or they'll be hazards in the future. And was the stock of good quality? Are these trees going to survive, thrive, and be less expensive for people to maintain? And we're not going to have to go and clean them up in emergencies because they were poorly formed. And those are things that we have consistently for years seen as challenges with BES's planting program and with Friends of Trees as a contractor, which we've communicated. And we're really hoping to see some good advances there. And we're focusing more increasingly on making it clear that those things are essential, that it has to be quality, not just quantity. Quantity doesn't get us there if the quality isn't good. So you'll be hearing that a lot more from our team. And that's one of the things that we have learned through the heat event, that, it's our job, it's our responsibility. So we're going to be really clear and direct about that going forward. And where it's not working well, we need to point that out, and we need you to understand that and support us in that, because that's what gets us the forest we need and keeps people from dying from heat-related illnesses in East Portland. Barbara, oh, I'm sorry, Vivek.
Leah and then Barbara.
So since I'm new, I apologize if this is like a really silly question, but knowing that there's this interest, which I feel it, I see it in my community, related to the heat event, is there an opportunity to like, I don't know what the rules are around as like a commission part of the city, but like can we have social media presence to sort of reach out to the public more about like how we're trying to do this work, and also to get more of that two-way communication of what, folks want or need in their communities?
Sorry, that's a great question, Leah. Here are the vehicles for that. Yes, advisory groups like the commission, DRAC, whatever they are, Planning and Sustainability Commission, they don't do web pages, they don't have a communications detail for various reasons. One of those is that you work with us, right? You're supposed to be advising me, working with and supporting urban forestry and parks, and then you help us advise council. And so we're supposed to do a lot of that stuff. But where the commission can do, with your advice, that's the whole point. And what the commission can do, though, around engaging with those, getting those messages out, is things like that Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland project. That is key. I think about, somebody said it, maybe, I don't know who it was in a previous meeting, but it's Portland Parks and Recreation. Trees isn't even in the title, right? So I don't know if that needs to change or not. And honestly, it's not my place to say at this point, right? But it is yours, and that is right in front of you. So that would be a great opportunity to talk about the heat event and what you know needs to happen, and to really advocate for that with the project. Same thing with council, as I mentioned. One of the most effective and impactful things that no city staff can do nearly as well as an advisory group is go to council and tell them from your official capacity as an advisor to them what's happening and what they need to do about it, and that they need to do it when, right? So if you want to decide to write a letter, or you want to vote on somebody who's going to go and speak on behalf of the commission, there's always the public comment period at the beginning of every city council meeting. And boy, is now the time to do that.
Okay.
That help, Liam?
Yeah, Barbara, can you make it quick? I want to move on to Angie's presentation. I'm failing miserably at my timekeeping right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Jen mentioned quality and quantity. And I think another place where we can, the Urban Forestry Commission and the messaging that comes out from the city is, and I heard this from somebody that was a staffer for one of our Congress people. I heard this in DC. And, we were talking about, well, we planted X number of trees, and, we're doing this and the federal funding is important and all this. And the person turned around to me and said, yeah, but what difference does it make? So I think that's another piece of that, is that, and, we're talking about how trees make a difference for heat islands. And, the thing that we've just gone through, and as I think it was Adrian pointed out, that's fresh in everybody's mind. So I think what difference we can make, and we are making, I think is an important part of that message.
Thanks, Barbara. Well taken. And I'd like to kind of bring this, thanks, Jen, for your report, and all commissioners for feedback. Let's make sure we keep some of these topics up and on our minds as we think about priorities, as we think about things we want to be spending more time on, as Barbara requested. And I'd just like to underscore that ongoing. I'd like to turn over to Angie, who has a presentation, and we've been highly anticipating. So Angie, can I just ask if you're looking for any specific type of feedback, or if there's just overall responses or anything like that from commissioners before you start?
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Give me 1 second while I try and sort out my controls here.
And it's working, yes.
Is it? Okay, you can see that. Okay, great. Thanks, Vivek. Primarily, my role today is sharing information, and especially with several new commissioners, making sure that you have some background information on urban forestry and our planting programs. And of course, we're always open to feedback and advisement on our projects and programs. I'm going to, in particular, point you to a couple of web resources where we post information. We have a new website, and your feedback on, could you find what I was talking about? Is this information helpful to you? Is there more that you'd like to see would be helpful? So thanks for clarifying that. Great, and I'll try to do the speedy version to at least try to keep us more on track here. So nice to meet the new folks of you. Adrian and Leah, welcome to UFC. My name is Angie DeSalvo, and I am Urban Forestry's Science Outreach and Tree Planting Manager. And forestry is my professional background, and I have been here with Parks for about 10 years now in a few different roles. And today I'm just going to give an overview and an update on the planting work that we're doing and a little bit of background. And hopefully this builds on the information that I presented on our trust funds report a few months back. Okay, so very briefly, some background. Parks, Urban Forestry, our funding for tree planting primarily comes from the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund, which was only established in 2015 for mitigation, to really make up for lost canopy for trees that aren't planted or preserved, mostly during development. We have some other sources of funding. We have a tiny bit from the city's general fund, but in general, I think it's fair to say that tree planting and parks has been underfunded over the years, and this has been our first real stable source of funding. So a lot of what I'm talking about is a ramp up. And you'll see that our numbers have been increasing because we're looking to more effectively spend that budget that we do have now that it's here and it's stable. So that's kind of the funding background. We're guided by Portland's Urban Forest Management Plan, as well as our tree planting strategy, which is growing a more equitable forest. And several of you were involved in that. This is our Community Advisory Committee. You may see some familiar faces on there. Thank you, Anjanette and Bruce, for participating, along with many community members. And those really give us our marching orders for where we plant, what we plant, where we're trying to make an impact. And in general, if I had to sum it up, I would say that our focus is large native and evergreen trees in the highest need areas. Our team, we have support from a couple of different work groups. On my team, the Science Outreach and Planting team, I have 3 dedicated staff members who work on planting. You've met over the years Molly Wilson, who manages the yard tree giveaway and community plantings. Mari Aviles came the last time I was here. She manages our street tree planting. And then today, and I'll ask him to introduce himself, Alex Javier is joining us to manage our park and interagency planting, as well as work with street trees. Alex, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm Alex Javier. I am the newest tree planting specialist on Angie's team. My background is also, it's a mix of urban forestry and traditional forestry. So the last 5 years or so, I was working in San Francisco for their tree planting nonprofit, Friends of the Urban Forest, as they kind of, the city itself transitioned from what we have in Portland here, which is the adjacent property owner being responsible for the maintenance of the trees and sidewalk, to the city taking over that management, and also all of the associated things like opt-out tree planting, like we're kind of starting to work on here, or street tree planting through city's funds. So bringing that kind of a transition experience from San Francisco to here, as well as having worked on various other more traditional forestry projects, like collecting research data, timber management, and things like that. So it's exciting to be here, exciting to be part of this new ramp up of using these tree planting and preservation funds to put trees where the equity plan identified they were most wanted, and kind of riding out the development of this program and being a part of it. So you have any questions or other things you'd like to know, please ask.
Great, thanks, Alex. Glad to have you on board. We're also supported by our operations team, who does most of our planting on city properties. Parks Horticultural Services does our procurement, as well as our contractors. We have 3 contractors that we work with: Friends of Trees, Treecology, and Cascadian Landscapers, and then many volunteers and residents who help with our planting. So these are the 2 web resources that I wanted to make sure everyone had, and I'll make sure to send this presentation out to you. But I just wanted to reiterate, like, online info is always out there and available in our program. We're trying to be really transparent about what we plant, where it goes, and how it's doing and what species. So on these 2 links, you can get everything from our planting strategy to our priority areas, a map of what we've planted. All that info is out there and available. So I really encourage you to go check it out, and then let me know if it works, didn't work. If you still have more questions walking away from it, that would be super helpful for me. All right, and one piece I'll call your attention to, that is on that website. This is a map of our priority planting neighborhoods, and this is where Parks is focusing our tree planting efforts. So about every 3 years we update this, and it's based on the most current information, and we call it our equity matrix. It's based on median household income, tree canopy cover, and % residents of color. And so where those 3 factors come together, we've identified about 20% of the city that is most in need of trees and their services. And that's where we focus on delivering programs and services too. All right. In terms of totals, how many trees do we plant? This shows our planting ramp up that I mentioned that's been happening over the past few years, and the colors indicate the property ownership. So, you know, city is green, street is blue, and private is that yellow orange color. And this year we're planning on around 2,500 trees. And you'll notice that most of the growth is in our street tree planting program, as well as in our private tree planting. And the part, like the city green, looks kind of flat, and we are planning in future years that as part of the Parks Operations Levy, we'll be increasing tree planting on city properties. That was a big commitment that came out of the Parks Operations Levy, and we're excited to have additional funds. That was really supported by Portlanders, the tree planting aspect, and so you'll see some increases there over time. So kind of what Jen mentioned, I just want to remind folks that, you know, total numbers like stems in the ground is important, but we are also really focused on the outcome. Did those trees survive? Are they large, native, or evergreen? Are they good quality? And so last year, 80% of our plantings met one of the criteria for being either large, native, or evergreen. And that really kind of segues into monitoring of trees. And just to let you know, we've initiated a long-term monitoring study using US Forest Service recommendations for urban tree monitoring. And so right now we have staff out there checking out all of our yard and park and our park trees, seeing if they got planted, did they survive, how are they faring, documenting condition and measuring growth. And you can find the results from our monitoring on that website. And generally, we're seeing good survival in the early years. We haven't been doing this long enough to really have a lot of long-term data. But for yard trees, once they're planted, after between year 1 and 2, we're seeing about 96% survival. And for park trees, in those first years, about 97% survival. And then that's going up in the following year, year 3, to about 98%, which is pretty good. We're pleased with that result. But as you know, it's good to know long-term, what's it going to be in 5 years, 10 years. So after monitoring for those first 2 to 3 years, the protocol has us coming back every 5. And so we'll be tracking survival over time. All right. So I just have 2 more slides. I'm give you a quick update on our private tree program as well as our street trees. So Many of you are familiar with our yard tree giveaway. That is the main program that we have for private trees. Essentially, we host events where folks can come and pick up to 2 trees for their residents. They take them home, they plant them, and we call it yard tree giveaway. This coming season, we'll be giving away 1,550 trees at 5 events. And we'll also be offering delivery to 2 different neighborhoods. That's going to be Centennial and Glenfair. And we do offer planting assistance by request. And again, all of our outreach is focused on those priority neighborhoods. Last year, COVID sure threw us for a loop, but we learned a lot, and we actually have adapted and taken quite a few good pieces that we learned through COVID. We learned that delivery is super popular, that folks offered delivery are going to request a tree at twice the rate than if they're not. So we're really focusing delivery on important neighborhoods. We have about 15% of folks that receive trees request planting assistance. So we are planting, 100, 200 trees at the end as part of the season. And that's been really helpful to make that program accessible to everyone. And we still focus on obviously large native and evergreen trees. And we went this year to pre-registration where you select your species rather than come to an event and see what's available. So that's really encouraged people to do their homework and for us to have conversations with folks about their sites and what works in their sites. And so we offer assessments where you can sign up for a time slot and meet with one of our planting specialists, go over your site, and they can help you select your species at the time, like before you register or before you show up and just want to pick whatever's available. So we think that's really helped us to sell those species that people might not immediately think of. Folks typically, they're familiar with things that flower, the small trees, the things that you can get commonly on the market, and that's not always what we're offering. So it's been a good opportunity to get that education piece out there. And then lastly, our street tree planting program. Primarily, we're planting street trees through what we internally are calling opt-out, but we also plant trees for other agencies within the city. But I thought I would tell you just a bit more detail about opt-out. And we don't like that word. We're trying to rename it a bit. It sounds, it's not very descriptive unless you're working in the program. But essentially, we identify neighborhoods and areas that are most in need. We conduct site surveys for the highest value sites. And then we approach the property owners, letting them know that we're offering trees and we are coming to plant trees. And if they do not want trees, they can decline and we won't plant. And in addition to tree selection and planting, those trees come with 3 years of watering and maintenance. And so last year was our first pilot year, and we planted about 250 trees and learned tons. And now we're out there repeating the process in an improved manner. And we're aiming for about 700 this year in Lentz, Park Rose Heights, and Argay. And a couple things that we learned, about 45% of residents opted out of tree planting. So 55% took trees, 45% did not. And we asked everyone why are you not interested in a tree? And the number one reason was tree maintenance. So cost, again, even with the cost of planting and initial maintenance being removed, that ongoing maintenance cost was still a barrier. And of all those folks that did opt out, I think it's important to note that 80% of those residents identified as having lived in their home for more than 10 years. So they're long-term residents. They've probably been offered trees multiple times. They're pretty sure they don't want them. And so that was helpful for us and sort of managing the communication and how we talk about the offer. So overall, we had a really good response. For the tree plantings, they're all free. They're zero cost to property owners. All 3 of our contractors were engaged in planting, and we see this as a growth area. as we plan out our budget, this year we're doing 700 trees. We will hit a cap the year following. 1,200 is about the max that we can plant with our current estimations for what's coming in through the mitigation fund. So I would say in another, not this planting season, but next, we will have sort of hit our max that we can plant with about 2,000 yard trees and 1,200 street trees through this program. So I think that's important to share as we talk about, ramping up, there's a cap and there is a point at which, we will have maxed out our budget, and that's where we're headed. And really, that's all I've got.
Angie, there's a question in the chat I'll read for you from Adrian. How do we know what % of the tree giveaways, whoops, wait, my screen just moved, are actually planted?
Yeah, great question. So of all of the trees that we give away, we go back and visit every single one the first year. And so we've been, and this is documented in our monitoring report. So we have been able to access and see the property and determine that 69% of the trees given away actually get in the ground. So there's 31% that either don't get planted, aren't there, we can't access the property. That's usually the biggest reason, at least half of those we just can't get into because we're not going to go through gates. They have to respond to a text or a call to let us in. But 69% is our current rate.
And then Damon has a question, I think you covered, but maybe it'd be helpful to repeat it. And survive in good condition to establishment? What percent of the yard tree giveaways are actually planted and survive in good condition to establishment?
Yep. So the way that we measure it, the first year, we say how many got planted. So that's 69%. And then we measure from of those planted, when we come back the next year, that year 2, 96% of those are still in the ground and alive. And the condition ratings are in that report. So that is a very important metric that we're tracking over time. You can give away 1,000 of something, but if none of them live, survive, grow, what's the outcome? So this is one of our lower cost programs. And so being able to have a higher number, knowing that there are some that may not get planted, but there are many that are, and tracking that is key to knowing the success of the program.
I wondered, Angie, too, if you could speak to what are the planting challenges you've seen with contractors' quality?
In terms of street trees?
Yeah, well, anything that's getting planted, street or park trees. I know that's been something we've really been tracking and that it's really important. We were just talking about quality being every bit as important as quantity. So yeah, like I know you and Alex have been looking at hundreds of trees every day and communicating with the contractors. So what types of challenges have you been seeing?
Oh, sure. So this was our first year working with these 3 contractors. And so I think we had a big learning curve. And so, everyone's getting used to each other and how we work and sort of the quality requirements. The work that our contractors do includes everything from procurement. So being able to find the species that we're looking for in the quantity and the quality that we're looking for. So we have some pretty strict guidelines around stock, from roots to shoots, how is it looking? So we did have some challenges with getting good quality stock. Oftentimes nurseries, if you're not too picky, sometimes they won't always give you the best. You've got to really ask a lot of questions, do a lot of inspection, but Mari was able to work with contractors to address issues like we had some girdling root issues, poor root structure. Let's see, container stock can be quite challenging to get good quality stock with as well. So I'd say we've worked with folks on that issue. When it comes to the actual planting, I think a lot of it is just some very basic things like planting depth, mulching, that sort of thing. And we did have to work with contractors to do what we call corrections. where we identify issues and work through them together, and then they all get corrected before the project closes out. And yeah, does that answer your question, Jen?
I think so.
Okay.
There are a couple other questions. I want to be sensitive of time, and thanks, Angie, so much for going at that swift pace and covering so much background information. There are a few questions, and I want to just maybe just call out the legal question that Daniel brought up, and the money question that Bruce brought up. Do we have a minute for those two?
I can speak to the legal one, and I did just put it in the chat. Great question. And of course, something that we are very attentive to. So city code, that's where it all lives. The city forester can cause trees to be planted, period. And the city code assigns, unfortunately, street tree maintenance responsibility to the adjacent property owner. And it doesn't matter who planted it, whether they agreed to it or not. And if you think about that, when you see CIP projects, capital improvement projects around the city, or development projects, private property development projects, trees are required to be included in those, and that is regardless of who the adjacent property owner is or what their opinions are.
So that actually ties in, before we go to Bruce's, that ties in with Megan's question about if the city took over maintenance. Do we know? Do we have any information on that question?
What's the question? I'm sorry.
If 45, Megan writes, of the 45% residents that opted out and the many that are shared maintenance, and many that shared maintenance as the main reason for not, was there any engagement of potential follow-up about whether they would be interested if the city took over maintenance?
You know, I can speak to part of that, and then I'll hand it back to Angie and Alex. But well, so we do ask why they don't want a tree, and as Angie said, the most common response is they don't want the maintenance burden. So we think that does equate to, if we were able to say, here's a free tree and it gets taken care of by somebody else throughout its life, soup to, birth to removal, that they would be a lot more interested. Angie, Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say that, we didn't follow specifically up on that, but it's also a little bit more nuanced. It's not just tree maintenance, it's also sidewalk maintenance is part of the answer there. And so those two are quite tied together.
Yeah, and I can't speak for Portland specifically, but in my experience in San Francisco, there are certain types, as we moved into the city maintaining this pruning and the sidewalks, there were still certain types of maintenance that the adjacent property owner will always be responsible for, e.g. like sweeping up leaves, dealing with fruit, seeds, other kind of debris. So we did surveys on like what things were the biggest pain. And so we figured, probably half of the maintenance that people think of is not the maintenance that we think of as urban foresters. And so I would imagine that even if there are still things that would be a barrier to certain folks, like, sweeping up the leaves, dealing with the fruit, that we could never address.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jen, I'm not sure if your answer kind of covers all of what I'm getting at. I think tree planting is a little bit different from some other kinds of utilities in terms of people's responsibility, especially if they haven't actually given their permission. And I'm wondering if this has actually been tested in court, because I could see people having a good case saying, this tree planting program, I never opted in, and 10 years, 30 years down the road, if a tree branch falls and the city has to get into a court case with a landowner, and the landowner saying, I never wanted this. I also think there's a definite equity issue involved here, in that I know the city is trying to plant in low-income neighborhoods. And if the city did not get somebody's permission and they're actually forcing some costs on low-income people over many, many decades for tree maintenance that they didn't want, and they never opted in. Have you thought of that?
Yeah, great, Daniel. You might have to remind me on the second one. I'm going to do the first one first. So remember that these are on city property. And to my knowledge, there hasn't been such a lawsuit, but we all know folks can get sued for anything at any time, and we see what happens in that case. But the fact that the city's own codes, the city's laws, have assigned that responsibility to the homeowner, that is the legal basis. And that is also the barrier and the burden that we would like to see get addressed. And it's mostly a funding issue, of course. It's a lot more money that we hope other bureaus like BES, who has a definite interest in stormwater management right on streets and has invested a lot in street trees, might be able to help with. Now, your other question, Daniel, repeat that for me, could you?
Sure. So I know the city has prioritized planting trees, street trees in underserved neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods. And if somebody did not opt in, they didn't say they wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
And partially because they didn't have the money, what the message is okay, for the first 3 years, we'll take it over, but then you're responsible, even though, chances are you did not opt in because you didn't feel like you had the money. And now they're going to get stuck with all this extra maintenance costs over 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah. And we are very sensitive about that. That was one of the key messages that we got from I think there were 6 or 7 different community stakeholder groups that work with us on developing, growing a more equitable forest. And I wish Anjanette were here, because I remember her saying, you have to be absolutely clear with people that they're going to be responsible for this, not the small print, but the big print afterwards. And we know from research nationally that other cities have gone in and put in trees without letting people say we don't want them, and that street trees that are then burdening the property owner. And that's why we are doing the opt-out approach, and so that folks can tell us they don't want one and we don't put one there. And Angie can speak to how that happens, that there are multiple communications around that. Or Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of communication. I think last year it was two postcards, 2 official letters, and 1 door hanger. And all of them were very clear about what happens after 3 years. And, it's a no questions asked. Like, you don't want a tree, it's not a problem. We're happy to take you off the list and happy to have a conversation about it. But if that's the choice the property owner is making, then we're respectful of that choice. And we've also been advised that the level of communication that we're having far exceeds the city's requirements for notification to let folks know what's happening. And generally we found that if people didn't want a tree, they did opt out, and there weren't surprises. There was a fair amount of folks that were just they were indifferent, or they even just like registering and selecting a tree and having to do watering would have been too much of a barrier for them. And so this allows them to participate and receive a tree without any action on their part. So, I was gonna say, feedback, I can respond to some of the questions in the chat if you're short on time.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you for offering. And Greg, I just wanted to, just in terms of time, check with you about a comment that you might offer the group as well.
Yeah, I just watching the clock and knowing that I personally have a 12 o'clock appointment, and our discussions of meeting time are always very lengthy. I feel like the Heritage Tree presentation that was scheduled is going to be repeated next month. And so I don't see, unless Jen or Angie have a reason, that we could not retrieve that time this month and do it only next month. We do have to have a hearing, and the tree hasn't been posted. So that's sort of why it got bifurcated, I believe.
That's right, Greg. Thanks for bringing that up and offering. We do have Gina Dake coming for this today, and out of respect for her schedule, we decided to proceed with the substantive part. Next time it'll just be a vote. We won't repeat the presentation. So we'd like to continue with that today. If the discussion about meeting time, if we need more time and that's your decision, Vivek, to do that, then that could get, that would be easier to move. Let's put it that way.
Okay, it sounds like with personnel here, with folks here like Gina here, it is important for us to cover this, Greg. And you're muted.
Oh, I'm fine giving the presentation.
Okay, and we can chat about, if we have time to talk about meeting time, then we can at least seed that conversation during our session today. And this is really about revisiting our coming together. Think about this in the back of your mind as Greg is presenting on this delisting of Heritage Tree, whether we want to come back together as people in front of people instead of people in front of screens, or if we want to kind of think about other aspects of this. It sounds like there's an opening here to rethink our location and meeting timing and things like that as well. So just the back of your mind, that's what if we have time, that's what's coming up. So Greg, and Angie's going to continue just to close that out. Angie's going to continue responding. And if there's a lot of stuff here with the tree planting program, sounds like. So as Angie responds, if there are other questions that emerge, Angie's offered to respond. So please put those in the chat. And with that, I'll turn it over to Greg to talk a little bit about number 76.
Great. Well, I'm hoping if Gina is there, she'll say hi. And if she's not, Angie will actually run the PowerPoint.
Yes, Gina is here.
Hi there.
Hi, Gina.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. So I'm going to go through this quickly as soon as it's on the screen. I know that it was emailed to everyone and it's a fairly standard process, but we do have 2 new commissioners. So I want to remind people that currently, unless a heritage tree is an emergency, it's damaged in such a way that city forester basically feels it needs to be removed. The current process is that the request for the removal and delisting comes to the Urban Forestry Commission. We actually have a hearing. That hearing has to be posted. I think it's 2 weeks in advance. And then we hear from anyone who might come to the meeting or I guess appear on Zoom. This time, because of COVID, it's a little different. The Heritage Tree Committee normally goes out and sees these trees. And we haven't been meeting, so we didn't do that. I did get the draft presentation from Angie about a month ago. I went through it. Tree looked totally dead to me, but I actually did go to its site in North Portland. And in a way, it's kind of like to confirm it and say goodbye. But this picture shows you really how magnificent this tree was. It's really a remarkable specimen compared to the other native dogwoods that we have. Angie, if you can go, yeah, perfect. Here's its sign. It's been listed since 1996. So the loss of this tree is a real significant loss. I think we have 3 currently listed of this particular species. And this was the largest. That height, that spread, and really wonderful form, multiple trunks. And I always remind people to look at the diameter of breast height and think of that in regards to the city code. So this is just 32 inches. And I didn't get Brian French out there. He's our Pacific dogwood expert, but I imagine it's as old as the house. So it's about 100 years old, probably more. It was probably there when they built the street, sidewalk, and house around it. It is a right-of-way tree, which is interesting. To look at the next slide. Well, that doesn't really show it, but it's right at the back of the sidewalk and in front of a chain link fence. This is in better days before it started its decline. You can just imagine this tree in full bloom. Next slide. So this is the normal history. It was designated in 1996. Things look fine in March 2012. There is a program where volunteers also go out and look. I think this September 2012 may have been part of the street tree inventory. That would be my guess. But then there were other volunteer inspections. And so what really, it was kind of rapid decline from October of 2018 till basically last fall. And there's not a leaf on this tree. I don't know when it last leafed out, but it's totally dead. So this, and I'll remind you that one of the items on Jen's code work list is that dead heritage trees, the city forester could actually just make this determination. And I'll support that probably with some adjustment, because we've had another tree, the catalpa that you might have remembered, Heritage Tree 51, that there was some debate that it wasn't really totally dead. And I actually visited it recently and it's made a pretty good comeback. But there is no doubt in my mind, even as not an arborist, that this tree is dead. And so the permit to remove and replant it came back October 7th. The normal multiple inspector visits took place. And you know, they're conservative. They wanted to wait to the next spring and see, you know, if the tree did manage to come out, and it did not. So no leaves, no real possible ways for it to recover now. So here's in the good old days, stunning tree. And it actually was one of the ones that Steve Terrell photographed. There's not, I have a couple pictures that I didn't put in this show, but the trunk truly is immense. And I don't know why it died. No one really has made that guess. The fence of chain link was growing into it, and it had that pretty big hole down at the bottom, and a substantial amount of damage from the dark, or in the bark, excuse me. When they took this final photograph, they found a nearby tree, also pretty large, but doing really well. So I do know that some dogwoods are subject to Phytophthora, so that certainly is a possibility. But all I can say is, based on my experience with the tree and the two qualified arborists, that this is dead, and that I'd recommend that next month we listen to anyone that speaks up at the hearing, but then it's your job officially to vote to allow its removal and delisting. So if there's questions, I can take them. Gina, you're welcome to chime in, and Angie, of course, is the one who put the initial presentation together. So I see a couple of questions in the chat, and I agree that I've seen some damage on a couple of the other Pacific dogwoods that I've sort of been eyeing for potential heritage tree nomination. If they're in the right site, which is probably not right next to a street, I think they actually still do pretty well. They've certainly been adapted for centuries, and they're native. And I'll talk to Brian about heritage trees as wildlife snags. He's really our expert there. But it would be up to urban forestry, because it is actually technically a right-of-way tree. So maintaining something as a snag would take, you know, monitoring and just a later removal. So there's no vote. I think, Vivek, if there's no people who want to speak up, that would conclude it for this
Okay.
month.
Well, thank you. And the next step, just to reiterate, is to go to vote on this. You don't need a vote from commission right now, do you, Greg?
We can't have a vote from commission. We have to have a public hearing first.
Oh, right. Okay, right. All right, I'm kind of tracking the chat, making sure if there's anything pressing that's coming up, please voice. Otherwise, we can plan on moving on to the appeals board appointments. It sounds like we have a couple of folks that are interested and willing to participate in the appeals board. And do we want to say anything about that, Jen, or members who are putting their names forward? The discussion is primarily that, like we talked about last time, to reiterate, we have a transition happening. Barbara is going to continue leading the appeals board as she's so diligently and generously done for years. And we have now, I think Megan is going to be stepping off of the appeals board. So thank you, Megan, for your very diligent and generous work on the appeals board. We have 2 new members who've expressed interest. Jen, do you want to say anything about that?
I do. Just procedurally, what we're after here is there needs to be a vote of the commission. So motions and vote for Megan to be able to step down. And yes, thank you very much for your service, Megan, and you've hung in there, I know. And then also votes for appointing new members. And some members have expressed interest in that. And I actually don't know who Brian heard from. So who are those people? I think, was it Bruce and Adrian? Are you folks
Bruce and Adrian are the 2 people who I have on my list. Yep. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Adrian. That's really, that's really generous of you to participate. This is really an interesting thing. Barbara, do you want to say a couple of words? I know you did last time about the appeals board and what Bruce and Adrian are getting them, offering to do as part of this process. You can get your mute to unmute. Oops, there goes your picture. Now you're unmuted though.
Yeah, so I just want to say that, so there is a training that goes with this before you can serve. And according to the rules of procedure, which the code authorized the appeals board to do, they needed to be approved by the entire commission, which they were. And so what we need is a vote of members present, which isn't a quorum, but we do have a quorum, which is great. And since we have 2 people that were interested in joining, I'm just going to jump the gun here just a touch and say, we're so glad to have you and welcome.
Adrian, Bruce, you want to say anything on this, or we can just continue with the vote? Do you want a stump speech or anything like that? This is your one chance. Okay.
No, this isn't a stump speech, but one of the things I'm particularly interested in pursuing is when the presentations are made before the appeals board, I want to be sure Urban Forestry has done as good a job as they can at looking at the site and the soil conditions, because often those are important factors to consider. So it's just a heads up.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce. Certainly.
All right. Then I think we're probably ready to call to vote here. We have, Damon, can I have a motion?
I'm going to motion that we don't allow Megan to leave because her commentary and questions are always wonderful.
Well, I don't know if that's a motion that Megan is willing to accept right now, so we probably need to.
I'll withdraw that. But I will motion that Bruce and Adrian be welcome to the appeals board.
Okay, Barbara, you want to second that? Okay. Yep, Barbara seconds that. And let's go with all in favor. I think you can raise your virtual hand. I think, is Anjanette able to? Okay, Anjanette's down there too. And all opposed. Okay, any abstentions? Bruce, got it. All right, so passed. Thank you. Barbara. Oh, it's really a sneaky mute button today.
You can actually press your space bar down for
Yeah, Barbara,
temporary unmute.
do you have a space bar to unmute? Thanks for that reminder, Daniel. No, okay. It's probably on an iPad or tablet or something. There we
Does
go.
Does
Yep.
that work? I saw a question come up from Greg. Does the appeals board need 5 members? No, it does not, but 5 members is how many people we can have on the appeals board. So a quorum is 3 votes. So whether you have 5 people there, you need 3 votes. 4 people there, you need 3 votes. 3 people there, you need 3 votes to carry the motion through. If you have 2 people there, there's no reason to have a hearing. So we do have 5 people. That's what the code provides.
Okay, so to reiterate, we have on the appeals board, Barbara, Damon, Anjanette, Adrian, and Bruce. Excellent, thank you. That's fantastic. So to kind of keep the conversation moving then, and I'd like to just talk a little bit about future of commission meetings. And as you may recall, we are still, as you may recall, we are still in a pandemic, and we are slowly kind of coming out of our pandemic shelter in place situation, and we're seeing a lot more activity. And I know that the city has been, and city staff have been instructed specifically to return to work whenever, if possible. And I know there's a lot of nuances to that, but generally speaking, I think there's a date in early August when city staff are expected to return to the office. And maybe that's not right, but that doesn't really matter so much. It really has to do with whether you all are interested in resuming meetings in person. And we've had our Zoom time over the last year and a half. And part of what we're really wanting to know is thoughts about advantages, disadvantages. I know that this has allowed a lot of folks to participate that may not have been able to participate. And I know that's true for my courses, because as my day job in university goes, we're also resuming in the fall with classes open for fall, open for all is what I'm hearing a lot right now. And that kind of is translating into a bunch of conversations about what we might want to do in terms of meeting time, meeting location, and meeting in person or Zoom. And as you recall, we've had conversations in the past about the accessibility question for meetings, not only by commissioners, but also by community groups, and trying to think about this in much of the conversation context that we had earlier today about how do we ensure that these conversations are, that we as residents of this, or at least participants in this commission and folks who echo the voices of the residents of the region, are able to bring ideas, thoughts, and also recognizing that we're not going to be able to bring all the ideas and thoughts of our relevant constituents. And so thinking about how do we bring our meeting in, how do we enable our meeting to be accessible to the broadest possible audience, while also ensuring that we are able to echo the sentiments of the communities that we serve. So thinking about time, thinking about kind of advantages, disadvantages of the timing of the location of in-person versus not. And so let me open it up there, and we have about, we're ending at 11:30 today, but if want to just open it up and maybe seed the conversation and respect your times, keeping with that 11:30 deadline. start with Damon and then Adrian and then Leah. Oh, you're muted, Damon.
I was actually last on the raising hand.
Oh, I didn't even see that. It just pops up in the strangest way up here. And then Barbara has her hand up as well. So Adrian, were you first? Do you want to?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I think, the balance of having relationship building with community involvement, we really need to think about that. Shooting from the hip, I think a minimum of quarterly in person and maybe even preferably every other month, some sort of a mixed approach so that we can have our cake and eat it too. In terms of location, given our role, in good weather, outdoor location would be attractive, but then I don't know how we solve the community involvement part in that case. So.
Okay. Thank you. I heard quarterly in person and then thinking about location, possibly outdoor. Leah, do you want to go next and then Damon and then Daniel?
And Barbara.
And Barbara, sorry, Barbara. The Zoom promotes these hands. Your hand doesn't get promoted for some reason.
It was right after Adrian, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Leah, why don't we have you go and then Barbara and then we'll go to Damon.
I'm just wondering, have we asked any community organizations like what would be the most accessible for folks they work with as far as the people we want to hear from that maybe there's more barriers to going to, downtown to go in person or something like that?
Wonderful question. Thanks, Leah. Really appreciate that. Not that I know of, but maybe I'm.
Well, I would vote personally for whatever the community needs. I would be happy to do.
Okay. Does anybody know on this call whether we have reached out to community organizations? I know Brian would be a really helpful source. Jen, have you heard as well?
I want to speak to that. Thank you. Yeah, great, Leah. That's something that we proposed to do a couple years ago. And the way we have not done that, are you interested? What we did do was confer with our experts, so to speak, in the Bureau, our equity and inclusion team. And what they said from the relationships that they maintain on behalf of our whole Bureau is that in order for that to be effective, we would need to probably do some joint agenda development and really look at, it's not just about the place, but it's about what are you talking about? Is it germane to us? Which we thought was terrific. That's like, yeah, that's what it should be. And to do that is a significant amount of resource that we don't have for that right now. So I'm going to say operations levy again. One of the many things that we haven't had time to talk about around the operations levy is, Parks is planning to really have a much more robust partnership and community support program, including urban forestry, including funding for those partnerships. And that's being developed centrally by the Bureau, which is great, so that all parts, urban forestry, recreation, land stewardship, can participate in it. And that is one of the things that has been talked about being addressed through that vehicle. And the rough timeline for starting that work, speaking on Todd Lofgren, the Deputy Director's behalf for a moment, so this may change, was starting in this fall and working on that concept and others around really empowering communities and community ownership with parks, including that one. So in other words, if I think that's a great idea, if you want to do it, we have to do some work to make it effective, is the way we've seen it at least.
Barbara.
So a couple comments. One of them is I had the same thought that Leah did, which, the idea of integrating, where we have, if we are meeting in downtown Portland, because I think some people have difficulty getting there, it is, I don't know if there's technically a way that we can do Zoom in one of those conference rooms. Another thought is that I've taught classes outside, and I've also done tours outside. And one of the things that I discovered is that if you're on a tour and you're focused on a heritage tree or a tree that's up for appeal or whatever it might be, people focus on what's right there. If you're having a meeting, they're looking at the traffic, they're looking at the clouds, they're looking at all kinds of stuff because there's no visual connection to it. So that would be my comment there to Adrian's comment. But I guess another thing that we could do is we could, if maybe the time is a barrier for some people, maybe we could drop, and I'm not talking about the time we start the meeting, I'm talking about the time we have the public comments. Maybe we could drop the public comments back and we could do like meeting minutes or I don't know, some presentation or the forester's report or something, and then go into public comments, which might give more people an opportunity to participate, because they're doing something like getting kids into school or whatever. So just a couple thoughts there.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. We go to Damon, Daniel, and Megan.
I agree with the idea of moving it out of downtown if possible. I think that like someplace like Mount Scott, Rec Center, or some other places might offer a decent facility. Some of the various rec centers around. I think when I'd mentioned about a hybrid version of the meeting, kind of like what Barbara was saying, I wonder if there's a way that we can have a screen set up, and folks that Zoom is best for them, they can go ahead and Zoom in, and we can just monitor the screen, and they can be there in the room with us. But I really miss the opportunity to interact face to face with y'all. So yeah, looking forward to hopefully someday soon getting back to that.
Yeah, and I will note, just a quick note before Daniel, Megan, that going into, just echoing that, going into City Hall with the intense searching of materials and pat downs and stuff like that is not only an equity question and not only uncomfortable in my own stuff, but there's a much bigger question of discomfort that I just want to voice about that I'm not really a fan of. And that's just, what mayor and commissioners have agreed to do because of activities downtown. So, and their interpretation of activities downtown. So that's something I just need to voice about the process of going to City Hall for our meetings in the past. Daniel.
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. This issue about going back to meetings is something I'm dealing with all sorts of groups. I think everybody's struggling with this.
Yeah.
But I think this idea of hybrid meetings is something that a lot of groups are considering, trying to figure out and looking at the technology that it's going to take. One thing we've talked about, a very simple kind of low tech thing, is to continue to have a Zoom meeting, but everybody bring their laptops to a meeting. And so whoever wanted and was able to show up, everyone's sitting there in a room with your laptop, you still have a Zoom, but you're also in the same meeting together. So that's like the lowest tech. Certainly a little higher tech would be to have a space that had a screen, kind of like what we had in the room in City Hall, where you can project presentations up. So a couple things that I wanted to mention, just as a real easy thing, Jen, I'm wondering if we could be starting the Urban Forestry Commission Zoom meeting 15 minutes earlier, so that commission members, we can talk to each other for 15 minutes before the actual meeting begins. I know that's not the same as meeting in person, but that would help, if we want to bounce things off each other. So that would be one thing. The other thing is, since we're revisiting everything, it might be worthwhile for us to do a Zoom poll or something to find out if the current meeting days of the week and times are still working for everyone. If we are going to continue to still make Zoom possible, we might be, who knows, we might be able to change the time. For some of the newer members, we actually used to meet a lot earlier in the morning. But certainly that has issues for some folks as well. But anyway, just wanted to make sure, as long as we're doing this Zoom versus hybrid versus in person, that we also think about days of the week and times. And I'm definitely a fan of maybe adding an extra half hour to the meeting because we always seem to be so rushed. And it would be great to have a time in the meeting where commissioners could at least, we could go around the room and everyone could say, here's an issue that I think is important that we talk about sometime in the next year. So anyway, that's all.
Thanks, Daniel. Very helpful. And if I had my druthers about me, I would have had a poll ready for you all to vote on all these things, but I didn't think about that until you just mentioned it, Daniel. So I think next time we'll try to run that and do some thinking on this in the interim. Megan.
Yeah, well, Daniel, what you just shared, I want to echo because that was actually the idea I wanted to suggest. If we continue in a Zoom format, is creating more space and time for us all to connect. Let's not start at 7 a.m. though, Barbara. I see that comment. I'm an early riser, but I do like that in creating those spaces. I do want to also share that Lorena had commented about the benefits of Zoom, and I had seen that Angie Annette had as well. So I know that hadn't been verbalized, but I think I'm open and I'm flexible. I'm fully supportive of the comments around City Hall not being the most inviting of spaces for many people, let alone convenient. And I do think that there can be benefits to Zoom. One just consideration I have with a hybrid model is how clear we need to be about where the meeting is if we move to that format, because I think of poor Brian, and we all missed him so much today, and we're able to see his skill set. With that is, if we are hybridized, we would have to be very clear about when we are having an in-person meeting and where, and when we are having a Zoom meeting. And I just really think about, like, I would be potential, like, it's easy to be confused and think it's the month that you're driving to the X location, and then actually it's the Zoom location. So I just wanted to bring that forward as we think about a hybrid model. And of course, my final thing that I can't is, I love community engagement, but I also love being gentle on the environment. So as a bunch of people that I think care about that, I think how we incorporate that as a consideration in terms of our emissions, or we all can start biking. Damon, you'd have to get started early, but just tossing that out.
Great, thanks, Megan. All right, I want to wrap this up. Jen, do you have a?
Yeah, I had a clarifying question, Vivek. Thank you. When y'all are talking about hybrid, do you mean sometimes everyone meets live, sometimes virtual, or do you mean live and virtual? I was thinking live and virtual at the same time, and then listening to Megan, I was like, oh, this might mean something else. So what are we talking about? What are y'all thinking?
I think it's two versions is what I heard. One was together with Zoom as participants can, and then the other was sometimes meeting in person and sometimes on Zoom. Those are the two definitions of hybrid that I heard.
Both.
Yeah,
Okay.
my comments were having meetings that have the option at the same meeting of joining virtually and joining in person. But yeah, like Vivek said, I'm also hearing from some people that maybe the in-person would be less frequent than the Zoom, and the Zoom would be all the meetings.
And I was also suggesting that we would do an in-person and same time Zoom meeting of some sort. So
Yeah, and I was suggesting, I called it an integrated meeting because so we integrate both technologies at the same time at the same place, wherever that might be. So we have Zoom going so that people that can't come in and go and have to go through that security issue that you brought up, Vivek, they can join on Zoom, and then some people would come in.
Oh boy. Okay.
That was my comment, was I don't know if we have the technology to do that, because that might direct that, that might make that decision for us.
Yeah, I think we need a holodeck at this point where we can have a three-dimensional image of us put on a seat in a chair. Well, this clearly is bringing up a lot. And Leah, do you want to have the last word on this?
I'll just say, as an educator who's done that, it's really hard to do it well. It's usually worse for everyone than just doing all in person or all on Zoom. So just something to think about, like we would really, it sounds really simple, but you have to think about the audio, the visual, making sure everybody has access and it's like they can actually follow along and it's engaging. It's not always great. So just keep that in mind. We would have to have a really solid technology plan. We would need some people who are like, we've done this, we are experts in making it work. It's not as easy as just like, we're just going to put a computer in the room. That's not going to be great for most people.
Yeah, right.
If I could
Jen?
go back, I
Jen
put this
and
in
then
the,
Barbara. Go ahead, Jen, and then Barbara.
okay, I put this in the chat. I want to make sure you saw it. Yeah, what Leah said. The city's actually talked about all the things Leah brought up, and like our tech people are scratching their heads. I think they're working on it, but we don't know when they'll come up with that. And if it's at somebody else's facility, like we went to a community organization in East Portland, either they would have to do that or we would have to have resources and equipment and have scoped the space out to bring it. And you saw what today was like, just when we had 2 people, key people missing in the minutes before. I have concerns. Okay.
Yeah. Barbara, close us out.
Yeah, so the other thing I don't want to lose track of is Daniel brought up the idea of, does the day still work and does the time still work? If you know, maybe there's not an option to join by Zoom, because I heard you know what Adrian said. I think it was Adrian, maybe it was Leah, and because I don't have that part up on my screen, but I don't want to lose track of that part of it either. Yeah, it was Leah. So yeah, I think we need to still track that, because we've talked about locations. We haven't talked about the other. And now might not be the right time to talk about it, but I don't want to lose track of it.
Okay. Oh boy, this is just opening up a lot of concerns and considerations, all really valuable input. I think for next steps, there's issues of feedback. There's issues. I mean, I'm going to be having to teach courses hybrid, in the hybrid sense of like part Zoom, part in person. And I'm not really eager to do that, but nevertheless, it's like, these are real concerns. I want to kind of be cognizant of our time. We're about 10 minutes over. Barbara, I see your hand up. Urgent?
Yeah, I just wanted to, maybe I wasn't completely clear, but one of them is the time of day.
Yeah.
Another one is the amount of time that we allocate for a meeting. And the other one is the day of the week. And the other one is the location. So there actually seem to be 4 issues that we could delve into at a later date.
Yep, I have those down, Barbara. I really think we need to somehow do a little bit of polling here to get at least a little more discreet in our responses. I just want to see what the kind of distribution is and see if we can kind of dig into that a bit more. There's some anomalies, and we're trying to get to yes here. Everyone's like working, this works for everybody, and we really want to make this as comfortable as and convenient and as climate conscious and as community conscious as we can. So lots of multi-criteria here. So let's keep this conversation going. Really want to thank you all for your feedback. This has been really a rich conversation. We covered a lot of ground. I need a nap. And so we'll follow up next time we'll follow up next time in August, and hoping you all stay well and hopefully participate in this amazing weather we have outside.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you all.